It's spring. What are the birds saying? This is the IssuesWatch podcast. Hello, and welcome to the IssuesWatch podcast. I'm Brad Muniz, your host for the bi-weekly accounting and auditing episodes. I'm the partner in charge of accounting and auditing at Sobel & Company. These A&A episodes qualify for nano credit. If you're interested in earning CPE credit for this and other episodes, hit the pause button now and head over to njcpa.org/nano to find out how. As a quick disclaimer, the views and statements expressed herein are my own and not necessarily those of the Njcpa or Sobel & Company. So, busy season's wrapped up. Firms, other companies start heading into other types of audits and other planning considerations, particularly employee benefit plan audits and nonprofit audits. But as it relates to the employee benefit plan audits, I want to remind those that either perform them or have them done. They're changed significantly this year. They're no longer the limited scope audits. If you're unaware of this or unfamiliar with this, you need to look into this, especially if you are going to be having a peer review, regardless if you're having a peer reviewer. As a peer reviewer, I will tell you what I often see is something that's new, people forget to adopt in the first year, and that's critical. So you'll hear more about this EBP in a little while. So I usually open up with FASB. What did Ralph Cramden say? You got a big mouth, and that's what happened with me. I said that nothing's been happening with the FASB. And what happened last episode? ASU 2022-01. What happens this episode? ASU 2022-02. So I think they heard me and said, well, if he's going to say something like that, then we'll come out with some stuff for him, unfortunately. So 2202, financial instruments, credit losses. If you're unfamiliar with CECL, current expected credit losses, I recommend that you really start looking into this. While it's not effective right now for private companies, for public business entities it was and is, I recommend that you look into this because it gets very, very, very deep. Now, the topic they came out with this time is an add-on, which I always find interesting that the pronouncement's not even effective yet and they've already got add-ons to it, modifications. And this one is financial instruments, credit losses, troubled debt restructuring, and vintage disclosure. Like a fine wine, the disclosures are great. It's vintage, okay? So a little bit esoteric, this area. It enhances disclosure for certain loan refinancing and restructuring by creditors when a borrower is experiencing financial difficulty. So you know what happened. Probably during the whole COVID time frame, things came to light of how they should be addressed. As it relates to the vintage disclosures, it's for public business entities. For an entity disclose current period gross write-offs by year of origination of financing and net investment leases. So it is a very concentrated, esoteric area. But if you have any of this information, you really need to look into this lending, credit issues. Now, one thing about CECL that I always do remind people, and we're at the New Jersey Society A&A Resource Group, we were discussing, has anybody really adopted this? This will ultimately affect, as it stands now, anybody that even has accounts receivable. So unless you're a cash basis financial statement, you probably have accounts receivable, which means you have to consider potential credit losses, i.e. bad debts. You can't just say history and that's your reserve. That's the way it stands right now. I've sat through a couple sessions on this, gets very deep. Okay, moving on. The Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board, FASB, proposes conforming 4 amendments into other technical releases. Those 4 areas relate to asbestos cleanup costs associated with facilities and installed equipment, cleanup costs associated with equipment, accounting for the disposal of general property and plant and equipment, and guidance for leases. Now you're sitting there saying, that all sounds very familiar. It's asset disposal, cleanup costs. How often am I going to see this? Well, I will say I've thought that many times, and over the past 3 years, I've seen it 4 times. Okay, so this is the type of stuff that starts coming up when people now start leaving and exiting leases and disposing of equipment. especially during this whole post-COVID timeframe. They realize they don't need as much space anymore, and they're going to start leaving the leases. Now, especially if it's warehouse, factory space, you may have broom clean requirements as part of your leases, which means you have to kind of get the facility back to the way it was when you took it over. It could also be some ground issues that you have created that you may have to clean up too. So just be aware of that. Okay, moving on, Aicpa has come out with some information on the Ukraine Audit Effects. It was really the PCAOB came out with some information. The Aicpa kind of tagged on and said, hey, this is really good information that you should think about, not just as it relates to Ukraine, and we're not trying to really focus on that. It's more when you have global and economic issues around the world, how you should be considering them as it's part of your audit. Certainly areas that you should always consider is identifying and assessing risk. You have to do that in any audit anyway, but now how is it enhanced and what areas are affected differently? Planning and performing audit procedures, possible illegal acts, okay? Reviewing of interim financial information, accepting and continuance of clients. That's an area that I think that, while I said PCAOB before, this is the type of stuff that starts bleeding into the non-PCAOB audits. And this isn't just about auditors, this is about people in industry too. And now you hear why the auditors be annoying and focusing on areas like this. You don't have to focus on. This is not material. Well, getting guidance from different areas that are telling us we have to start thinking about things a little bit differently. And of course, group audits. We know that that's going to be a big focus in and of itself with some guidance that's been coming out of late. Aicpa came out with a pretty interesting article I picked up and read, and it was professional responsibilities in data security for tax professionals. Nicole, I'm stealing your area. But it's not all about Circular 230, okay? I bet you Nicole probably never thought I knew what Circular 230 was, but it's not all about Circular 230. It references Aicpa Code of Professional Conduct. It references Graham Leachy. Really, in reality, I wish they would have taken off that tax professionals or that tax reference, because professional responsibilities in data security is something that we have to consider in and of itself for confidentiality as licensing. This has state board requirements. But I see it a lot even in the audit area. You know, I'll review a lot of work papers internally, peer review, helping other firms, and I'll find things within the work. First, I'll find that the computers are not secure. People will just send me a computer in the mail, okay? They'll just drop a computer off at the front desk and there's nobody sitting at my front desk, and they'll pick up the computer and there's a simple logon. So you really have to consider the data security particularly for your clients and the companies that you work for too. One of the areas that I do see a particular weakness is that within the work papers, especially employee benefit plan work papers, I see it often, or payroll work papers, I will see the Social Security number for all the participants that they're testing within the plan, and sometimes the entire plan. So you have to be very careful for that. I mean, this says tax professionals because there's sensitive data in there. Well, employee benefit plan audits that have Social Security numbers, that's sensitive data too. So be very careful about that. Okay, a couple PCAOB items that I want to talk about. PCAOB came out with a spotlight on the confirmation process. We thought it was really interesting when we saw this, and the Society A&A Resource Group talked about this. It's not important just that it's important about the PCAOB came about it. This is the type of thing that trickles down to the Aicpa. And they want you to focus on the full confirmation process and everything that's in there. Look for the spotlight that the PCAOB has put out. It's a pretty good read and gives you a little insight as to what the Aicpa will consider start focusing on. A couple of things real fast. The 2022 exam priorities of the SEC. They said that they're going to be focusing on crypto. And remember, there's an Aicpa guide for accounting for digital assets. Doesn't focus on audits that much. It looks at the accounting. And of course, ESG. In future episodes, you're going to hear me saying a lot more about ESG. They've been a very hot topic on theirs. So I crammed a lot of stuff in. Sorry if I went a little bit fast there, but a lot has been coming out lately. So in closing, I'd like to remind you about some upcoming Njcpa events. As I said before, you have the employee benefit plan audits that are going to be starting, and with that, the audits of the Employee Benefit Plan Conference for the New Jersey Society of CPAs is May 19th. It is a virtual conference this year. And the last free webinar for the Njcpa members in the current fiscal year will be on May 10th with a replay on May 24th. The creators of the True Crime podcast, Oh My Fraud, sounds great, will unpack 2 favorite fraud cases and discuss how to prevent and detect fraud. I recommend people look at this for their staff. I'm telling you, I think that it's a great idea. Have all the staff involved in this. Register for these and have the staff register too for these and other events at njcpa.org/events. Lastly, to join the Njcpa Accounting and Auditing Standards Interest Group, go to njcpa.org/groups. Thank you for joining us.